let's be honest for a sec. We've all been there, right? Scrolling through social media, completely zoned in, and then bam, the power goes out.
It's like we forget how much we rely on electricity until it's gone.
Totally. It's almost funny like how fast we become aware of our dependence on it. So for today's deep dive, I thought we could throw it back way back to a time before all the gadgets and gizmos.
You're talking like no electricity at all.
Exactly. No Wi-Fi, no smartphones, not even a light bulb.
Wow. Okay, I'm intrigued. Where do we even begin to unpack that?
Well, our friends over at Podcast English Learning helped map out this fascinating scenario, and trust me, it gets interesting. We're talking like a full-on exploration of what life without electricity would really look like.
It's kind of wild to think about, like just how pervasive electricity is in our lives.
Totally. It's like the air we breathe, we don't even notice it until it's gone. But let's try to imagine waking up in a world without it. No alarm clock jarring you awake.
Sunrise becomes your alarm clock. Or, maybe the rooster next door.
Okay, so no more hitting snooze on my phone. I guess that's a given. But what about just like the things I need to get ready? Coffee, for example. How does that work without electricity?
You want coffee. You better be ready to work for it.
Oh no, what does that mean?
Think about it. How much do we rely on electricity just for that one morning ritual? Without it, you're not just like brewing, you're participating in a whole process. Sourcing beans, roasting them.
Wait, are we talking like hand-cranked grinders and open fires here?
You got it. Early mornings, manual labor. Suddenly that cup of coffee feels less like a routine and more like an achievement.
Talk about earning your caffeine fix. And what about breakfast? It's not as simple as grabbing a yogurt from the fridge.
Forget the fridge. No electricity means a whole new relationship with food. Fresh dairy is out the window.
Yeah.
You'd be relying on dried goods, root vegetables, anything that won't spoil quickly.
So much for those make-ahead breakfast sandwiches I love. Okay, so we're already starting the day with a workout, and not the kind I'm used to. But let's talk chores. Because something tells me laundry day just got a whole lot more involved.
Remember those memes about adulting and laundry?
Oh, don't even.
They take on a whole new meaning when you're talking about a world without washing machines and dryers.
Wait, so no washing machines or dryers? I guess those washboard memes hit different when it's not a joke.
Exactly. And it's not just the physical labor, although there's definitely a lot of that. But clothes become more valuable, You'd think twice about buying something if you knew you couldn't just toss it in the washer.
That's a good point. No more impulse buys on fast fashion.
Right.
And what about just, like, cleaning in general? I guess I can say goodbye to my robot vacuum.
You're going old school. Brooms, dustpans, good old-fashioned elbow grease. Every speck of dust is a reminder of the work it takes to keep a house clean.
And cooking. I'm guessing no more scrolling through recipes on my phone while the microwave does its thing.
Cooking becomes a slow dance with fire, literally.
Yeah.
You're tending wood stoves, carefully planning meals around what's fresh and in season. It's a completely different relationship with food and fuel, for that matter.
Well, good thing I like chopping vegetables. Okay, so let's imagine this. Chores are done, the sun is setting, it's time to unwind. But wait, there's no TV, no internet, no scrolling on my phone until I fall asleep. What do we even do with our free time?
That's where things get really interesting. Leisure time gets redefined. You rediscover the simple things, the things that actually foster connection and creativity.
So what? We just sit around in the dark and talk to each other.
Hey, conversation can be pretty entertaining. And don't forget about things like board games, reading by candlelight. Music becomes a communal experience, like family sing-alongs around the piano instead of everyone plugged into their own headphones.
Honestly, I kind of love that. It's like stepping back in time. But what about staying connected to the outside world? No social media, no texting. How do we even communicate with anyone outside of our immediate circle?
Remember the lost art of letter writing? It makes a huge comeback. But here's the catch. Replies aren't instant. You're waiting weeks, maybe even months for a response.
Wow, that's a different.
It is. And local news travels at walking speed, literally. If you want to stay informed, you better be ready to chat with your neighbors.
A world where gossip can't be spread with a click. I don't know if that's terrifying or amazing. But either way, it definitely makes those face-to-face interactions a lot more valuable. Okay, but what about getting around? No cars, no trains, no hopping on a plane for a weekend getaway?
You're walking, cycling, maybe even riding horses if you're going long distances.
Horses.
Seriously.
Hey, it worked for centuries. Think of it this way. Remember those leisurely Sunday drives that take all day? That's everyday life now. A trip to the grocery store becomes an expedition, and you become acutely aware of what things like convenience really cost. Wow. I can already tell this is making me rethink my entire relationship with transportation. But before I get too overwhelmed, let's shift gears for a moment and talk about something a little more serious. Healthcare. Because something tells me a world without electricity would have a pretty profound impact on medicine.
Absolutely. I mean, hospitals as we know them simply wouldn't exist. We're talking like basic care, the bare essentials. A lot of the medical marvels that we just rely on today would be basically
No
useless.
more life-saving surgeries or, high-tech imaging equipment. That's a sobering thought.
Right. It really highlights just how much we depend on electricity, even in something as essential as healthcare. Clean water, sanitation, access to basic medication, these become paramount concerns.
It definitely puts things in perspective. We're so used to the instant gratification of modern medicine. It's easy to forget just how much we rely on electricity to, keep us healthy. But this whole scenario isn't all doom and gloom, is it? I mean, there have to be some upsides to this unplugged life, right?
Oh, absolutely. Don't forget this slower pace of life, the lack of constant digital stimulation. It opens up a world of possibilities. Tons. And it's not just nostalgia. This isn't really about like romanticizing the past. It's more about recognizing that maybe, just maybe, we've kind of lost sight of some valuable things in this constant quest for connection and convenience.
So how do we actually apply those unplugged lessons? Like I'm not about to ditch my smartphone and go live off the grid, but I can see the appeal of a little less screen time, a little more real life connection.
It's all about finding that balance, right? Think of it like a digital detox, but you get to choose your level of unplugging. And it starts with awareness. Just like simply recognizing how much we rely on electricity. It allows us to appreciate the convenience, but also to ask ourselves, okay, at what cost?
So the next time I'm binge watching a show while my smart speaker's playing music and my dinner's heating up in the microwave, I should probably take a moment to just acknowledge all that, huh? This like invisible web of technology that makes it all possible.
Exactly. And it's not about guilt or anything. It's more like gratitude. And maybe a little bit of mindfulness about how we use these incredible resources. And then from there, we can start exploring small ways to like incorporate those unplugged benefits into our modern lives.
Give me an example, like how do I channel my inner 19th century homesteader without actually having to, churn my own butter?
One word, intentionality. Remember those like slower, more deliberate activities we were talking about? Reading a physical book instead of endlessly scrolling through social media. Cooking a meal from scratch instead of just hitting up the nearest takeout place. Having an actual face-to-face conversation instead of texting. It's about being present, engaging your senses and appreciating the process.
So kind of swapping instant gratification for a little delayed satisfaction.
Yeah.
I can get behind that. It's like choosing a handwritten letter over a quick text. Yeah, it takes more effort, but the reward, the connection, so much greater.
Yeah. Exactly. And that ties into another key takeaway from all of this. Fostering connection. Remember how, like, without the constant digital distractions, we'd be naturally drawn to connect with each other in more meaningful ways. Family game nights, community gatherings, even just like striking up a conversation with your neighbor while you're out for a walk. Those things become essential, not just like optional.
Right. It's a good reminder that true connection, it really does require presence, both physically and mentally. And without those constant notifications vying for our attention, it's amazing how much more we notice, how much richer our experiences actually become. But let's be real, we're not all going to suddenly give up our gadgets and move to a remote cabin in the woods. So how do we find that balance in our modern plugged-in lives? How much unplugging is enough?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? And honestly, the answer is different for everyone. The key is to experiment and find what works best for you. Maybe it's designating certain times of the day as tech-free, like meal times, or maybe an hour before bed.
Ooh, I like that. Because even those small changes can make a big difference, right? Like instead of just automatically reaching for my phone first thing in the morning, maybe I try waking up 15 minutes earlier, enjoy a cup of tea, and like actually listen to the birds chirping outside.
Now you're getting it. It's about creating those little pockets of stillness and intentionality in our otherwise, plugged-in lives. And who knows, those small changes might just inspire bigger ones down the line.
It's a journey, not a destination, as they say. And like any good adventure, it's about embracing those unexpected detours and discoveries along the way. Speaking of discoveries, earlier we were talking about how a world without electricity would completely transform transportation. No cars, more walking, maybe even a resurgence of horses.
Right, like something out of a history book.
Exactly. But that also got me thinking about the environmental impact. Because our reliance on electricity, it's not just about individual convenience. It's so deeply intertwined with larger systems and resources.
Absolutely. When we try to imagine a world without that constant flow of electricity, we inevitably bump up against the reality of our energy consumption and what that means for the planet.
So this thought experiment isn't just about, like, personal growth and rediscovering the simple life. It's also a stark reminder of our planet's finite resources and the urgent need for more sustainable practices.
Precisely. It's a call to action, both individually and collectively. Because while we might not be ready to just ditch electricity entirely, we can certainly make more conscious choices about how we use it and how we produce it.
Which leads us to the really big question. If we're not going back to the Stone Age, how do we power our modern world without, destroying the planet in the process? We'll tackle that right after this. So, we've been talking about all these individual changes we could make, but then there's that other side of the equation too.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, even if we all become super energy conscious, there's still the question of, like, where's all that energy even coming from in the first place?
Exactly. It's like we can swap out all the incandescent bulbs for LEDs, but if our energy grid is still powered by coal, we're not really solving the problem, are we?
It feels like this needs to be a much bigger conversation.
It totally does. It's not just about individual actions. This scenario, I think, really forces us to reevaluate, like, our entire infrastructure.
Oh, okay. Zoom out a little bit.
Yeah. Like our transportation systems, building design, our whole approach to energy production and consumption has to change on a societal level if we're going to make a real difference.
So investing in renewable energy sources, prioritizing energy efficiency in buildings, maybe rethinking our reliance on cars, that kind of thing.
Exactly. This whole thought experiment just highlights how interconnected it all is. Like our personal choices matter, but so do the larger systems that we're a part of.
It's a bit overwhelming when you think about it that way, to be honest.
I know, right? It can feel like a huge task. But that's where I think, that spark of optimism comes in. Because it also shows us the potential for positive change. Oh, I like that.
If we can reimagine something as fundamental as our relationship with electricity, just imagine what else we can accomplish when we put our minds together.
It's like necessity is the mother of invention, right? Maybe by embracing some of these unplugged lessons, we can unlock a whole new wave of, ingenuity and progress.
Totally. And that's what I find so exciting about all of this. It's not about going back to the 1800s. It's about taking those lessons we've learned and applying them to the present. It's about progress, not regress.
Innovation, not deprivation.
Exactly.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, what's like the one thing you hope our listeners will walk away thinking about?
That's a good question. I think for me, it really boils down to this. You have more power than you think. Like every choice you make, every action you take, it has a ripple effect. So ask yourself, what can you do differently, even if it's just one small thing?
It all adds up, right?
Exactly. It's about those small, sustainable changes that can lead to much bigger impacts down the line. Well said. And that is a wrap on today's deep dive. We covered a lot of ground today, from waking up with the chickens to the future of energy. It's just incredible how this one simple question, what if we lived without electricity, can open up so many different avenues for conversation, for reflection, even for action.
Yeah, it really makes you think.
It does, and that's what we're all about here, right? Getting you thinking, getting you curious, maybe even getting you a little bit uncomfortable at times. Because at the end of the day, it's those moments of discomfort, those challenges to our usual way of thinking that can lead to the most meaningful growth. So thank you for joining us on this journey, and as always, keep those minds open, keep exploring, and we'll see you next time.